who is supposed to prosecute this crime that you're describing? Or if things go maybe as we hope, who is watching this right now that can say, oh, we're going to go get him? Is that the Department of Justice? Is it another entity, or is it complicated?
So you'll recall from old cases like the tobacco settlement and from a bunch of the environmental litigation of the past 2 or 3 decades, that technically U.S. attorneys, which are a part of the Department of Justice structure, have the ability to bring actions in this kind of realm. The Department of Justice, under Attorney General Barr, has the not only ability, but has the legal responsibility to actually focus in on violations of antitrust that include both the domestic problem we have, which is the interstate commerce issues and all of the interlocking directorates and all that kind of stuff, and the Section 802 domestic terrorism out of the Patriot Act, the domestic terrorism issues. And the reason why I bring that up is very simple. The definition of domestic terrorism includes anyone who takes on actions meant to coerce a population, intimidate a population, and procure from the government advantage. That's actually an act of domestic terror defined under Section 802 of the Patriot Act. There is no question that what has happened is in fact an act of domestic terrorism as the definition sets forth. When Andrew Cuomo gets in front of the camera and says, you're going to have to tell me which 26,000 people aren't going to get ventilators because I need 30,000, he's trying to influence a government. It turns out New York never needed 30,000 ventilators. They never even got close to using all 12,000 that were made available through all kinds of other things, or the 1,200 that they actually had. They never needed 30,000 ventilators. They never had 24,000 people who were deprived access to medical care. But Andrew Cuomo engaged in, by definition, under the Patriot Act, domestic terrorism by seeking to coerce a population and influence a government to take its resources. The fact of the matter is, the Department of Justice and William Barr have a moral and legal obligation, and I would raise the stakes. This is existential to the democracy. This is about whether or not we have separation of powers, or whether, in fact, we can sell 100% of the United States to a corporatocracy, which is violating laws that a century ago were so odious that we passed the Sherman Act and the Clayton Act specifically to make this not happen.
Yeah. And that's why you've said, quote, COVID-19 was a branded campaign of domestic terrorism, unquote.
That's correct.
And that is your point of making this. And I just had a flashback to Al Capone. They got him for tax evasion. So if people don't remember Al Capone, gangster, violating all the prohibition laws, led to a lot of crime, murder, etc. But they didn't get him on any of those charges. They had to get him on tax evasion. So this seems to me to be the David Martin equivalent of that. Am I getting your drift here?
You are exactly where I have been going. This is, at the end of the day, criminals have the ability to do flagrant acts. And the more flagrant, the more incredulous the populace is. We just sit back. Plato talks about this in the Republic. He talks about the fact that if, and I'm going to paraphrase using Eddie Izzard, the British comedian, if you kill one person, it's murder. If you kill 2 people, it's serial murder. If you kill 5, people start going, oh, wow, that's kind of unusual. And you maybe need to be examined under a microscope. But if you kill 1 million people, people almost celebrate with incredulity. How on earth did you pull that off? And Eddie Izzard does a really cute bit about, do you have a death tea, death breakfast? And he does a really cool sketch about it. But Plato talks about sometimes when crimes get so egregious that the humanity that's inside of all of us sits back and goes, we actually can't believe somebody would have done that. Is it really possible that the Imperial College of London and the Center for Disease Control and the University of Washington and Johns Hopkins University, that those 3 organizations could actually work together to bring 40 million people into unemployment? Like, that's Stalin-esque, right? We can't even wrap our head around the scale of it. And then the idea that could be architected by a Bill Gates, Dr. Elias operating as the extension of Bill Gates, Anthony Fauci, China Center for Disease Control, interlocking directorate on the Global Preparedness Monitoring Board. Can we actually believe that 3 people could have architected this thing? And the answer is, we're told that's too incredible to believe. That's just too incredible to believe. But every single historical account of organized crime, of organized genocide, of organized mass extinctions of populations and livelihoods have always had 2 or 3 people who are their architects.